Good evening, everyone. Will Dupree here in the KXAN live studio. We do appreciate you all joining us here on our streaming platforms on Facebook, KXAN.com, and the KXAN News app. Once again, this is the day that many Texas voters are sharing their preferences on which candidates will ultimately make it to the ballot in November. Polls just closed about 15 minutes ago here in Texas as we await results to now come in. We come to you right now with a little bit of analysis and expectation about what's going to come later tonight. So with that, I'm going to introduce our two guests who are joining me here in the studio. We have the two Joshes, and I promise that's the last time I'm going to joke about that at all. We have Joshua Blank there at the top. He is the research director at the Texas Politics Project at UT Austin. And then to his right is Josh Hinkle, who is the host and executive producer of the State of Texas program, which you see on many different screens all across the state. Josh, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We're going to first start and talk about what's going to be happening. A lot of voters are weighing in on which preference they have for the Democratic presidential nomination, and the big outlier here is the role that Michael Bloomberg's going to play. This is the first time he's appearing on any ballots. So first, Josh Blank, I'm going to start with you. What do you think? What are you expecting with Bloomberg now on the in the race on the ballot?
Well, honestly, it's tough to say. I think, we've seen a lot of movement in the last few days, and we know that a lot of Texans, although many vote before actual election day today, over 1 million votes have already been cast. But, given all the movement we've seen in the last few days in terms of Buttigieg dropping out of the race and endorsing Biden, Klobuchar dropping out of the race and endorsing Biden. In reality, a lot of people have been endorsing those candidates, then coming basically to also endorse Biden. You sort of wonder whether that's going to blunt all of the money that Bloomberg's been spending in Texas and elsewhere.
Because he has made a huge investment in the state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Josh Hinkle, again, Bloomberg's in the race, but who are you expecting to see and perform pretty well today? Any prediction?
Well, I think, a lot of it depends on who people decided to cast their ballot for. If they were going to vote for one of the people that dropped out over the weekend, with Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, and Mr. Steyer, I think that there were some decisions that had to be made. And so when you got to the polls today, if you didn't do early voting already, you had to figure out who's the next best candidate for me. So I think right now we've been hearing a lot of talk here in Texas about Joe Biden and also Bernie Sanders. But, the results are coming in, as you've said, so I'm excited to see what happens tonight.
Yeah, I want to show you all. If you voted today, again, I'm just prefacing this because I can already expect the comments. This is the order that the candidates have appeared on your ballot when you voted today in the Democratic presidential primary. 17 candidates in total, and a lot of them have dropped out of the race at this point. So a lot of people have already voted early, and some of those candidates, what's going to happen? So Josh, do you think, where do you think the support's going from these candidates that have dropped out, particularly Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, just in the last few days?
Well, in terms of polling, we have some sense of what people's attitudes were about this. We ask a lot of people in the UT Texas Tribune poll, but a lot of polls have come out over the last few days in Texas that focus on not only people's first choices, but also their second choices. And I think the thing that would probably surprise people who don't look at this stuff all the time is the fact that it's not so cut and dry. So it's not as though, if Buttigieg was necessarily, let's say, positioning himself as something of a moderate, and Klobuchar certainly was positioning herself as somewhat of a moderate in this race, it's not really clear that all their supporters instantly go to Joe Biden and Mike Bloomberg. In fact, throughout this race, and it's not just even these recent polling, just going back over the whole campaign, we see that for the most part, voters are splitting in a lot of different directions. And I think that sort of speaks to, the difficulty in really honestly this entire contest. I think there's a reason voters have been waiting so long to cast their ballots in Texas and elsewhere, and it's because it's been a fluid race and it's been difficult for people to make decisions. And so we don't necessarily see that because Buttigieg dropped out, that's an automatic boon to Biden. Mm-hmm. It seems like it's actually a little bit more spread out than that.
Yeah, I think, though, you have to remember who are they endorsing after they drop out, and that's an indication of, where they would like to see their own supporters throw their support now that they're not in the race anymore. And with, Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg, they both put their support behind Biden. So it seems like a lot of people might follow suit with the people that they were supporting before.
Well, again, we have Joshua Blank from the Texas Politics Project and Josh Hinkle, one of our very own here at KXAN, joining us for analysis at the moment. We are tracking, of course, the presidential primary here in Texas, but also the Democratic Senate primary, which has 12 candidates. As you can see right here in this full screen, these are all the people that are now vying for that Democratic nomination for the Senate seat and to go on and challenge Senator John Cornyn, who, of course, is running for re-election. He does have some challengers in his race, as you can see right here, though he is expected to walk away with a victory this evening. Right now, we do have one person, an additional guest to bring in at this point. It's Rebekah Allen. She is a news editor at the Texas Tribune. Rebekah, thank you so much for joining us. And what are you paying attention to tonight, particularly in the Democratic side in that Senate primary?
Hi, thanks for having me. In the Democratic primary, we're watching, very closely. Obviously, this is a race where there's, no clear winner. More people who were being polled in the weeks ahead of this said that they had no favorite going in than the percentage of people who had picked a candidate. We are expecting that, that there will be a runoff, and MJ Hager is leading in the polls. But as for who comes in second, it's really unclear at this point.
All right. Thanks so much again, Rebekah, for joining us. And we apologize that there was a bit of a echo in your ear. That might have been a little bit hard to talk with that. But again, we're going to let you go so that you can keep on reporting and come back in a little bit later in the newsroom there at the Texas Tribune for some additional analysis. So we do appreciate that. And sorry for the echo in your ear if that was an issue. Once again, here in the studio with me is Josh Blank and Josh Hinkle. Guys, anything else that we're looking forward to this evening? I mean, the polls just closed. If you got in line at 7 o'clock, you can still vote. So presumably there's going to be quite a bit of wait at some polling locations, particularly in the Austin area. We've seen long lines. So what are you guys expecting there?
Well, I think, exactly what you're talking about right there with some of the problems we've been monitoring right now. Some places, like here in Travis County, got off to a rough start this morning. Some poll workers did not show up to several polling places, so that caused some delays and some upset among people who had waited till Election Day to figure out who was still going to be in the race so they could, have the exact person that they're going to be voting for still count when their vote gets tallied. After that, we've heard about some other problems around the state. There was some problems with the Secretary of State's website for a while, but at this point, if you were still in line at 7 o'clock when the polls officially closed, you're still going to be able to cast your ballot. And what we've seen in recent elections, at least here in Travis County, was that the lines were pretty long toward the end of the day, so those times could be extended for quite a bit. So I think that just in general, with as many delegates as Texas has, we could be tallying these for quite a while, and it's very possible that we won't know the exact final total until maybe tomorrow.
Well, something that has just come into our newsroom right now is some of the early voting numbers from Travis County in particular. So again, this is all the 2-week period before today. And what we're seeing right there in that particular number is that Bernie Sanders is leading at the moment. 1 second, I'll pull those numbers up so that we can look at them. I don't have the percentages necessarily. Oh, wait, yes, I do. Sorry, this is live with us right now, so I'm just pulling that up. The early voting totals at the moment in Travis County have Bernie Sanders leading with 37.07% of the vote here in Travis County. In second at the moment, if I'm looking down the list, is Elizabeth Warren with 25% of the vote, and then it's followed by Joe Biden with 12%. So there, again, is Bernie Sanders leading in the early count here in Travis County, followed by Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden. Guys, these numbers are just coming in. We're just looking at this along with all of you joining us here live. So any reaction to those numbers coming in?
Well, I wish you'd asked me the other question before you said the numbers.
Okay.
So you're saying, what am I looking for tonight? I mean, one of the questions that I kind of have, I think, in all of this is the power of progressivism in Texas and whether it's really relevant here. I think, there's been a story, and it's been true for a long time, that Texas Democrats tend to be more moderate than their national counterparts. But I think, polling data, as we've accumulated over time, is showing a more liberal electorate and a more extremely liberal Democratic electorate.
I mean, that definitely goes to show in these early voting numbers. Again, this is just from the 2-week period ahead of today in Travis County, where it's Bernie Sanders leading with 37%, Elizabeth Warren with 25%, Joe Biden with 12%. And then I was also looking, because I didn't mention that a minute ago, it seems like Michael Bloomberg has just gotten 9.6%. Interesting to note, though, that Pete Buttigieg is at 9.19%, so very close in the vote counts with those two candidates. Josh, is that surprising that maybe Michael Bloomberg isn't pulling in more support? I mean, he spent a lot of money here in Texas.
You know, that doesn't really surprise me considering this is Travis County and some of the other names on the ballot. But I think what's really telling there, though, is, what those numbers that you just mentioned for like Pete Buttigieg, where are those people going to go for the election day, because they didn't have Pete Buttigieg if you decided to wait and vote till today. So I'm just interested to see how much more that might bump someone like Elizabeth Warren up.
Yes, and I'm also looking at the moment at some of the Senate numbers coming in from Travis County. At this particular time, it appears that MJ Hagar on the Democratic side, again, just to specify, on the Democratic side, MJ Hagar is leading at the moment when the early vote count in Travis County with 39.46%, so almost 35%, and then Christina Zinzun Ramirez is in second with 26.48%, and all other candidates, no one has cracked the double digits there in the early count. I'm Josh Blank. I don't know if you've been tracking this particular race. Is that surprising to see these two candidates at least leading just in Travis County with these early vote totals?
I don't think it's surprising to see Hagar in the lead at all. I mean, she's been the front runner, I put that in quotes, throughout this race. I mean, she hasn't really had more than a plurality, and the reality is what's defined this race is the fact that most voters are really unaware of who most of these candidates are. Having said that, I think, Ramirez coming in second here might not be so surprising in the sense that, in Travis County, we don't necessarily have a hometown candidate. Hagar's the closest thing we have to that, given that she ran up at Round Rock in the congressional race in 2018. But I mean, I don't know if these are the numbers we're going to see in Dallas County, where Royce West has, a pretty strong foothold, or what the sort of things, vote we're going to see in Harris County, where Amanda Edwards is an at-large and Chris Spell has run there for Congress. So I mean, there are candidates who have more connections to other places. None of these candidates really have a strong connection here, so I'm not entirely surprised. But also, I think you look at the top of the presidential ticket with Sanders and Warren pulling in about almost 60% of the early vote. Is it so surprising that someone who's really one of the self-styled progressives in this race, and Ramirez, is coming in second here? If anything, maybe it's a little more surprising that Hagar is actually further ahead of her.
And with this field so wide, though, I mean, we're pretty much going to have a runoff, and that means that they're really going to have to be focusing on that, while John Cornyn is focusing on the general election. So he's at another advantage there. So that's something to really watch for ahead of, in the next few months.
Just to be fair, I was looking also at the Republican early vote totals coming in from Travis County alone. We want to underscore that this is not statewide. This is just for Travis County. Donald Trump in his primary, even though he has a few challengers in the race, he's pulling in 91.49%. No surprise there at all. And then in the Senate side, John Cornyn running for re-election and seeking his nomination again for that seat. He has 85.72% of the vote. No surprise on either front, right?
No, I mean, Donald Trump has job approval among Republicans in Texas that's close to 90%. It's higher than any statewide elected official, and certainly just extremely high. And John Cornyn's a little bit more of a complicated situation, but I think, as he's sort of defended the president really vocally over the last few months, he's really done a lot of favors for himself with Republican voters. Not to say that he was ever in real threat here. I mean, he's a pretty well-established Republican statewide elected official here, and there's no reason to think that he was going to have too much difficulty. But this is kind of par for the course here. Yeah,
and a huge war chest to go forward now and focus on the general, because there will be no runoff in that particular election. But we'll have to see who comes out in the end with the Democrats, because as you take a look right here, there are 12 candidates in that race, and polling has been pretty close, pretty low for all of them. So it's a little bit hard to see. Obviously, MJ Hagar has raised quite a bit of money. And I do want to play something for you all really quickly, is that we have crews all over the Austin metro area covering different races, and we will hopefully bring them to you all live at certain points. But we asked our Erin Cargile, she is at the MJ Hagar Watch Party in downtown Austin, and she sent us back this report as she was preparing once she got to that watch party. So take a watch, and we will talk to you on the other side.
Hey, happy Super Tuesday, everyone. Erin Cargile here with KXAN. Wanted to give you a little bit of behind the scenes at the MJ.
And I don't know why that was playing upside down, so we'll try to fix that and bring it to you another time.
It's a wild polling place.
Yes.
Right, yeah, the party has just begun there, so we'll see what happens. But guys, anything you want to add before we wrap up our stream? We're going to be coming to you all at home multiple times throughout the evening with different analysis and breakdowns and some additional interviews and other guests. But before we go, anything you'd like to put out there too before we do that?
I mean, I think of the results we just talked about. I mean, I think, what's going to be interesting to see what the election day returns do to these early voting numbers. I would expect to see a lot of fluctuation in the presidential contest because there's just been a lot of fluctuation. I actually think these Senate numbers, there's not really any reason to suspect that what we saw in early voting is going to be significantly different from what we see on election day. So I wouldn't be surprised if these numbers actually, hold within a range going forward here, and maybe Ramirez is the one who makes the runoff. But we have to see what happens in some of those other counties.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that voter turnout is one of the big topics of today as well. I mean, a lot of people showed up on election day. A lot of people showed up on the early vote. So I'm really excited to see how things turn out tonight and see how we move forward in the next few months.
One more thing before we go, I just thought about this, is that Joe Biden was in Dallas last night. We've mentioned that he was endorsed by his former presidential rivals, or primary rivals, I should say, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, and Beto O'Rourke. He joined them last night in Dallas to endorse Joe Biden. Does he play a factor, do you think, today, garnering some support for Joe Biden?
I think that's a really tough question to answer, honestly. I mean, I think there was a point at which there was nothing that Beto O'Rourke could do wrong, and we certainly departed from that part in his trajectory and his political arc at this point. I think a lot of people pointed out, sort of his really active involvement in the Fort Bend County special election here, which is, again, really inside baseball, and sort of his lack of impact there. I think that's a little unfair. I honestly, think to some degree that the whole, Beto O'Rourke has some sort of special sway in Texas thing is a little bit overplayed. I mean, he's not some multi-term home state governor. He was someone who was, a congressman from to be fair and respectful, also a far corner of the state, who, ran one race and then lost another. So, I mean, I'm skeptical that he has too much sway at this point.
Unless
and
you're
Josh
taking
Hinkle,
him-
what do you think about
Unless
that?
you're taking him to Whataburger, right?
Yeah. I wish we had that picture pulled up because, again, after the rally last night, Beto O'Rourke took Joe Biden to Whataburger, and then they were signing napkins for little girls and all kinds of things. It was kind of a fun moment, a fun Texas moment for sure. Well, again, if you're just joining us, we're going to wrap up our stream here in a moment, but we're going to come back to you throughout the evening with various updates and additional guests. But Joshua Blank and Josh Hinkle are going to be hanging around to provide some more insight and analysis with us. Guys, thank you for being here, and we appreciate it. We'll check in with you again a little bit later today.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks.
All right. Again, if you'd like to follow along, we have a live blog on our website, kxan.com. You can also follow it on our KXAN News app, and we will be back with you here shortly throughout the evening. So stay with us and have a great rest of the night.